and welcome to Cocktails and Fishtales for the month of August here. I am Stina Troyer, your science specialist, and I'm delighted to have Danielle Nordstrom here with the Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife. Of course, as always, for those of you tuning in, we would love for you to let us know in the comments where you're watching from. And as well as this presentation goes along, the comment section is a great spot for you to input your questions. Just type them as they come up, and I'll make sure to field those Danielle's way at the end of the presentation. Now, while you're getting comfy and cozy, we always like to kick it off with a little bit of wondering what our presenter's favorite cocktail and biggest fishtail is. So Danielle, I'm going to turn it over to you to share those two bits of information.
Absolutely. I had a hard time picking my favorite cocktail, but I think I'm going to have to go with a very well-made high shelf gin and tonic. Nothing beats that on a hot day.
What is the Empress gin where it's purple? Ooh. Excellent. And how about a fishtail for us?
A fishtail. I was going to start talking about like a big halibut that I tried to catch one time, but you reminded me that I do have a lot of good stories from working with Wdfw. And one time we were out trawling for English sole off the wastewater treatment plant just north of the Elliott Bay Marina. And we caught an airplane.
Oh,
it came up, pieces of airplane. We had to report it. It was crazy. We had a whole wing in our nets. But yeah, that was probably the most
be the biggest fishtail we've ever heard. Usually, it's like, I caught a fish this, but no, I caught an airplane.
Yeah, it was crazy.
Good way to go. Oh, well, thank you so much for sharing that. And hopefully for those of you tuning in, you can let us again know in the comments where you're watching from, who you're watching with, and of course, if you have any questions as you go along, because tonight we have a fabulous presentation for our monthly science social, of course, done digitally during these wild, weird times. We hope, of course, that you're all out there staying safe, wearing your masks, get vaccinated, all that good stuff. We love science, and if you're worried about that, we are science educators, and we'd be happy to talk to you to quell any of those maybe concerns or misconceptions. We're happy to talk to you, so reach out to us. We got you. And so with that, I would like to turn the stage over to Danielle, who is a Washington Department Fish and Wildlife biologist, working with, I'm going to make sure I read it because it's a long title here, the Toxics Biological Observation System, which is something that the Harbor Wild Watch team has gotten to partner with and putting mussel cages out into places where we can then see how that works. So I'm not going to steal your thunder and tell you much more about that, but it's the mussels behind community science. And so it's not just the bivalve, it's the people too. And we're excited to hear more about this amazing work that you and your team help facilitate. So Danielle, all of you.
Thank you. And I love that, the mussels behind the mussels. So I will share my screen. Am I already sharing there we go. Excellent.
Awesome. I see your screen and I hear your voice. So I think we're all set.
Okay. So thank you for inviting us to present tonight. So many people don't even know that our team exists within Wdfw. And we are, of course, as she said, the Toxics Biological Observation System, which can be a mouthful. So we go by TBiOS, and we look at contaminants in the biota within the Salish Sea. And some of the different environments we monitor are the midwater, where we sample adult salmon and herring. English sole gives us the contaminant results for our benthic or seafloor habitat. We have a nearshore habitat where we study juvenile Chinook and bay mussels. And I am happy to talk about our Wdfw Mussel Watch program. Tonight, I will be discussing how our team is using transplanted mussels to monitor pollution in Puget Sound, and how community science partners such as Harbor Wild Watch have been essential in helping us survey such a large geographic area. And I'll also go over data results from our past surveys, which revealed some interesting patterns. And at the end, I'll provide information on how you can volunteer for our upcoming fall survey. In fact, the photo shown here was taken by one of our volunteers, and it really does a great job of capturing that scene of our monitoring efforts. I absolutely love seeing that Seattle skyline in the background. So before I get into our project details, I want to go over what makes mussels such a great monitoring tool. Mussels are widely used in monitoring programs, and they make great natural sampling devices. They filter food items and other suspended particles from their marine environment onto the mucus lining of their gills. And so as they eat the food, the contaminants build up in their tissues until their body reaches an equilibrium with the environment. They have the concentration of contaminants in their mussels' soft tissue. It generally reflects their exposure within the last 2 to 4 months. So they're accumulating recent environmental contaminants. And unlike fish and mammals, mussels don't have a liver. So they can't metabolize any of the contaminants they do take in. And I want to stress that these mussels that we use, they're used as a tool in the study, and they don't indicate any type of human health consumption limits. And we just simply want to find out the condition of the nearshore, basically where the contaminants can enter into the Puget Sound. Our mussel monitoring survey is part of a long-term program that monitors toxic chemical contaminants in the Puget Sound nearshore. And this program has evolved over time. Initially, it was supporting our the NOAA Mussel Watch program, which sampled wild mussels at 18 different sites. But with the defunding of the NOAA program in 2010, WDFW initiated a pilot study in 2012 to continue monitoring, but we used caged mussels transplanted to over 100 sites. And WDFW wanted to find out if it was logistically possible. The program has since been very successful, and having completed 3 more surveys in collaboration with the Washington Department of Ecology's Stormwater Action Monitoring Program. It's a mouthful, but we call it SAM for short. And we also work with several other local interest groups. So the goals of the joint SAM WDFW program. First, we wanted to determine the current status of contaminants throughout Puget Sound. And then we also, sorry about that. There we go. Nope. Better, okay. And we also wanted to find out the trends. Are the conditions getting better? Are they getting worse? Or are they staying the same? So this map here, it shows our 2018 sites. There were 92 total that year between SAM and partner sites. And you can see that we cover a wide geographic area, which is Puget Sound. And then that year, we also had a couple of sites on our outer coast. The sites have various upland use types and both low and high developed areas. And then the mussels are exposed over a 3-month period during the winter. It's normally November to January. The survey takes place every other year. Under the SAM study design, we have conducted surveys in 2016, 2018, 2020, and then our 2022 study will begin this winter. So many people ask why we use transplanted mussels instead of wild mussels. Well, we can visit more sites since we're not reliant on those native populations, because beaches simply, not all beaches have a mussel population. And we can also make sure that the starting population is uniform in size, age, reproductive stage. We can make sure that their exposure period is 2 to 3 months for all the sites. And knowing the starting condition of our mussels, it really gives us the ability to measure and compare growth, body condition, and mortality between the start and the end of the study, or even between sites. So you might wonder where we get our mussels. All of our mussels come from Penn Cove Shellfish. It's an aquaculture facility on Whidbey Island. And they not only provide clean aquaculture source for mussels, but they're also the only growers that are a source for this native mussel that we use for the project. And it's Mytilus trocellus, which is also known as the foolish or bay mussel. And each survey year that we go out there, they donate over 9,000 mussels and hundreds of feet of aquaculture bags, which is extremely generous. So many thanks to them for supporting this project. And pictured here up in the upper left, you have Ian Jeffords, which is the owner. He's the one that's wearing the PFD. And then Tim Jones is the taller gentleman on the left. That is the aquaculture manager. And you can also see images of their rafts in Penn Cove and their harvesting vessels. Our mussel field study, it begins with our bagging operation at Penn Cove. So first we work with a team of volunteers for this. Primarily it's with the Sound Water Stewards on Whidbey Island. And they help us to sort and bag mussels in preparation for transplanting to sites. And the mussels are sorted to a select size range, and up to 20 healthy live mussels are placed in a netted aquaculture bag. So we take the bags and we zip tie one end and we put 10 mussels in. We put another zip tie in the middle and then we put 10 mussels in and then cap that off with another zip tie. And you can see on the bottom left here, those completed bags are attached to a line and they're hung out on the Penn Cove mussel rafts. And they rest for 10 days prior to deployment. And we rest them so that they can recover after being handled. The bag mussels, they're deployed in anti-predator cages. You can show in here in the bottom left is a good photo there. They're deployed to locations throughout Puget Sound. It's during a series of 4 to 5 nights at low tide. And the deployment of mussel cages to over 80, sometimes 100 sites during a short tide window is only possible because of the hundreds of citizen science volunteers and partners that help us. The partners' logos are just a few of the ones that we work with here. We are extremely fortunate to have volunteers that are willing to venture out on the beaches during the winter at night, and they're armed with headlamps and mussel supplies and data sheets, and they're the only reason that a monitoring effort at this scale is possible. During deployment, we have at least 2 volunteers go to a study site for safety, also for retrieval as well. But during the low tide evening, they deploy the mussel cage at the 0 feet mean lower low water line, or rather just a 0 feet mark. And I had someone ask me the other day, well, why do you go out at night? And during the winter months, the nighttime low tide is the only one that gets low enough for us to put those cages out. Sites vary between sandy beaches to cobble substrate, and they can be parks, privately owned lands, etc. And we make sure to get permission and give instructions on how to get to each spot. Volunteers will then take those mussel bags and they suspend them into the upper third of the anti-predator cage. And then they secure the cages to the substrate, and we have helical anchors, rebar, cinder blocks, all kinds of things to secure it down to the substrate. And some of the largest zip ties you'll ever see, some are about 5 feet long. And the cages are then left out for about 2 to 3 months, which is the amount of time it takes for mussels to equilibrate to their environment. And when it's time to retrieve the mussels, our volunteers will go back to the site during another series of nights at low tide. The volunteers keep the mussels in their aquaculture bags. We give them Ziploc bags. They put them in there, and then they go on ice overnight in a cooler. We don't want the mussels to touch any of the fresh water from the ice. And then the next morning, they drive the mussels and gear to our lab in Olympia, or they can meet up with a mussel runner. So when the mussels arrive at the lab, day of, they're first rinsed and gently separated, and then we examine them for mortality. So because we know how many mussels went into those cages, we can calculate what their mortality rate is. After all the dead mussels are recorded and removed, we determine their condition index, which is kind of like an overall health on 12 randomly selected mussels per site. Volunteers measure the total shell length, and then they shuck the mussel tissue into a pan, shown in the upper right-hand corner there. And then they're dried in an oven for about 18 to 24 hours, which just draws all of that moisture out. And we find their overall health or condition index by dividing the dry weight of the soft tissue by the shell length. We also, which is the main part of our study, is to perform chemical analysis on the mussels. So we shuck a set amount from one station into a cup, and we use a Bamix mixer shown in the bottom right, kind of like the same one that you would use to make a milkshake at your house. And we call it a mussel smoothie. And we put them in jars, and we can send them to different labs that can do the analysis for us. So these mussel composites, they were analyzed for a range of organic contaminants in mussels. And I'm going to be talking a bit about the contaminants that are highlighted in yellow, which are polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, or PAHs, polychlorinated biphenyls, which are PCBs, polybrominated diphenyl ethers, which are PBDEs, and organochlorine pesticides, such as DDTs. And we do test for the other ones shown here. And we also test for metals, a whole suite of metals, but I will not be going into those for results today. Now on to the results. So as I said, I won't go into all the contaminants we tracked today. Instead, I'm going to show you the range of concentrations for the 4 most frequently occurring and highest organic contaminants that we detect. And these are just for the SAM monitoring sites for both 2016 and the 2018 studies. The x-axis down here, you'll see, is the contaminant type and the survey error, and the y-axis is the concentration in parts per billion on a logarithmic scale. All 4 contaminants were detected at 100% of the SAM sites in 2018. In 2016, PAHs and PCBs were detected at all the SAM sites and at over 80% of the sites for PBDEs and DDTs. We also calculated the starting concentration in mussels from the aquaculture source at Penn Cove, that you can see those in the green squares. Now, these are the mussels that were not deployed, but we sampled them the day of deployment. So we just, instead of putting them in a cage, we put them directly on ice. The 2016 PBDE and DDT baseline concentrations, they were not even detected. So we call that, it was below the LOQ, or limit of quantitation. And as you can see, concentrations at the source were below the concentrations at all of our study sites. This is an indication that all the deployed cages accumulated additional contaminants from their site environment. Now you can also see a pink diamond there, and those are the concentration in mussels from our 2018 Penn Cove reference site. These mussels were deployed for 3 months, but at the Penn Cove aquaculture facility. They were mostly below concentrations at the study sites, with the exception of the DDTs in 2018. When we compare the 2 survey errors, we found that the PCBs and the DDTs in the SAM site mussels had significantly higher median concentrations, or you see their red P values. We plan to closely monitor those contaminants in future surveys to track whether there is an increasing trend. And the highest range was PAHs, followed by PCBs, and both were detected at all of our sites. So I'm going to discuss these 2 contaminants further. Polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, or PAHs. They are a class of chemical that occur naturally in fossil fuels such as oil or coal. They're also found in creosote and incomplete combustion of organic matter. And contamination by PAHs is ongoing, and there's little source control of this pollutant to date. Some of the major pathways that the PAHs enter into the Puget Sound include atmospheric deposition from the air, especially from fires, land-based runoff from roads such as stormwater, surface water runoff, and then inputs directly into the Puget Sound itself, like oil leaks and spills from marine vessels. This map here shows the relative PAH contamination at each of our mussel monitoring sites for the 2016 and our 2018 surveys. And just to set it up a bit, to compare concentrations between sites, we established concentration range using percentiles that act as a baseline of conditions, or rather a frame of reference, so that we can compare them with future survey results. So up in the far left corner, you'll see that concentration values at or below the 25th percentile were considered relatively low. So they'll have a green dot or square. Values above the 75th percentile were considered relatively high, which are in red. And then values between were intermediate, which are yellow. And then we had a fourth category, which were values at or above the 95th percentile. And those you'll see as the red square with that center white dot symbol. As you can see, most of those higher PAH concentrations, which are the red symbols, are associated with more urbanized and industrialized areas like Elliott Bay, Eagle Harbor, Sinclair Inlet, Commencement Bay, and Gig Harbor. However, they were also high in other basins at sites near Port Angeles, Port Townsend, Anacortes, and the Bellingham Bay areas. And then the sites with the low contaminant concentrations were mainly in the remote Hood Canal Basin, but also up in the upper Whidbey Basin. Now the inset in the map, it focuses in on the Gig Harbor and Sinclair Inlet areas. That's where the 3 sites are managed by Harbor Wild Watch. And I tried to add the names down here and show you where those sites are. So we have Beach Drive East, which is the yellow symbol. We have the Kitsap Street Boat Launch near Port Orchard. I hope I got these right. And then we have the Austin Estuary, which we call it the Donkey Creek Delta for this survey, and that's in Gig Harbor. In these maps, we can see how the PAH concentrations have changed between the 2 survey years. And the Kitsap Street Boat Launch and the Donkey Creek Delta sites remain both in the high category. And then the Beach Drive East is in the intermediate. However, other sites in Gig Harbor show a general increase in PAH concentrations. So these categories, they allow us to compare concentrations between sites, but additional monitoring data and analysis will allow us to determine if there's indeed a significant increasing or decreasing trends in contaminant concentrations. So the analysis of our 2019-2020 data will allow us to determine an initial trend. And of course, COVID kind of threw a wrench in our plans for that. The laboratories were shut down for a bit, but we got our results and we are in the process of looking at that data. Polychlorinated biphenyls, PCBs, they are a persistent organochlorine compound, which were once widely used as coolant fluids in electrical devices, in carbonless copy paper, and in heat transfer fluids. And they were also used as plasticizers in paints and cements, stabilizers in PVC coatings, and in sealants for caulking and adhesives, and in yellow pigments used in paints and dyes. So wide range of ways to use that one in the industrial area. So even though they were banned in 1979, the PCBs are a legacy contaminant, which means we still find PCBs today. And you can also find them in old buildings, and they're sometimes found in stormwater runoff. As with PAHs, those higher concentrations of PCBs were associated with the more urbanized areas throughout. And though the highest concentrations observed were in Elliott Bay, Sinclair Inlet, Eagle Harbor, and Gig Harbor. But they were also high at sites near Port Angeles, Bellingham, Edmonds, and Olympia Bud Inlet down south. Again, sites with the low concentrations were only in the remote Hood Canal Basin, but I do see one up there, I think Drayton Harbor maybe. Looking again at the Gig Harbor and Sinclair Inlet areas, we see the concentration in the intermediate to highest categories. And note that in the 2018 survey, the Donkey Creek Delta, I don't know if you can see my cursor, and the Kitsap Street Boat Launch, in Sinclair Inlet, they had PCB concentrations in the highest 95th percentile category. So we further see a general uptick in PCB concentrations in Gig Harbor as well. So stepping back from looking at changes in concentrations at individual sites, here I'm showing what we call cumulative frequency distribution plots, or CFDs. And these allow us to show the spatial extent of these contaminants inside our study sampling frame, which was all of the urban growth areas throughout Puget Sound. From these, we can see that the Puget Sound-wide patterns associated with each contaminant. So the ones shown here are the results from our 2018 survey. And you'll see on the y-axis is the cumulative percentage of UGA, which is the urban growth area, nearshore length, that's covered by our SAM study design. And then the x-axis is the concentration of each contaminant. The dashed red line is the mean baseline condition. Remember, those were the mussels that were sampled day of deployment and not put out for 3 months. And then the dashed blue line was our Penn Cove reference concentration. Those were the mussels that stayed at Penn Cove for 3 months. The patterns for the PAHs, PBDEs, and DDTs shown in the red boxes were similar in that they all were more skewed towards the low concentrations, suggesting that the majority of the urban growth area shoreline covered by the SAM study design has a relatively low concentration. And I'll give you an example because they're a bit hard to read. So for PAHs in the upper left box, that showed that 90% of the total urban growth area near shore length had concentrations below 1,000 parts per billion. That's 5 out of the 48 sampled sites had concentrations that exceeded that 1,000 parts per billion. And they were all located within close proximity to marinas or ferry shipping terminals, which are all possible point sources for PAHs. The patterns for PCBs in the upper right-hand box were unlike the other contaminants in that it had a more gradual contaminant accumulation. So this told us that the sources of this contaminant are more widely dispersed within the Puget Sound urban growth area. And over time, we can plot the CFDs for each survey year and determine how the spatial extent of the contamination changes. We currently have 3 mussel monitoring reports available online. The first is from our pilot study in 2012 and 2013, and then the 2015-16 and study and the 2017-18 study reports. Those are the years that we started collaborating with the SAM program, and the websites you see are listed below if you're interested in reading more about the survey. They're very easy to find on our website. So if you go onto the Wdfw website, we have a, under, I believe, species and habitat, we have a contaminant monitoring section that you can find them under. The 2019-20 survey, as I said before, the report is pending data analysis. So watch for that to come. Yes, our upcoming 2021-22 mussel survey volunteer opportunities. So this coming survey, we are planning to bag mussels up at Penn Cove, October 18th through the 21st. We are going to be deploying cages November 4th through the 10th. And then we're going to be retrieving those cages January 27th to February 2nd, not 7th. That would be a long week. And this year we have 2 sites that Harbor Wild Watch volunteers have already been gracious enough to take on. Our Beach Drive East is not being visited this year, but our Kitsap Street Boat Launch and the Donkey Creek Delta are on our list. And I believe we have 2 volunteers for each so far, but we like to see sites have more than 2 people when possible. I mean, it isn't necessary, but it's nice to have backup and more hands to carry gear. I have also placed the upcoming project on our Wdfw volunteer website, which has a map of all of our sites, as well as links to those reports I had on the past slide. And the project page will direct you to contact me via email or phone, which I've put up here. You can write that down. My phone takes both calls and texts, and you can get a hold of me and I can get you registered for the event if you're interested. And with that, I can take questions.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Danielle. That was a lovely look, and thank you for really zeroing in on on the Harbor Wild Watch sites. I think it was fun to see that information. And I guess while we wait for folks who are tuning in, again, you're welcome to type your questions in the comments, and I'll get those over to Danielle here. But I'll start with a question that I have, is wondering how plausible would it be to almost like strike up a competition with ourselves to be like, okay, what actions can we take to reduce PCBs or reduce PAHs, the Pahs and the Pahs in the mussels as we deploy them again this year, right? Or are we too industrialized, connected? I don't know. It seems like a fun challenge, perhaps.
It does seem like a fun challenge. And the problem is we don't know where these contaminants are coming from. There could be many different point sources, one point source. That's why we want to do the monitoring so that we can see, is it getting better? Is it getting worse? So yeah, I think that would be a tough one to individually challenge, but I think becoming knowledgeable about PAHs and PCBs and the different suite of chemicals can definitely make a difference.
Awesome. Another question, just because of the recent heat wave that corresponded with those low tides, it looks like maybe at Penn Cove, all their mussels are hanging from docks. So maybe that the heat wave wasn't an issue, but curious, did the heat wave have any impact on this year's mussel stock?
I have not talked to Penn Cove yet after that heat wave, but yes, they do use those rafts, and the rafts are kind of can move around with the tide. So I'm guessing that they should be fine. We've had problems in the past with maybe mussels not growing as much. So we'll see what the condition of the mussels are when we get up there. And I've talked to other shellfish farmers, some with some tribal shellfish farmers that said that theirs were okay. So we're very hopeful that everything will turn out fine and that we'll be ready to go come this October.
That is good to hear.
Yeah.
Kind of worried about our intertidal sea creatures after that.
Absolutely.
How about another, just maybe I'm thankful that you didn't say your favorite cocktail is a mussel smoothie. Very funny and clever. And yeah, I think I'm gonna give folks just a little bit more time to get these questions in. Maybe actually I'm gonna refresh our page just in case, because I know people are tuning in. We've got folks watching from Gig Harbor, we've got folks watching from Brownsville, and another Gig Harbor friend.
Wonderful. Well, if I have a question for your viewers. One of the highest concentrations for PCBs was in Gig Harbor. And if they have any ideas where these PCBs are coming from, maybe there was a remediation effort that stirred up sediment, or because you guys have local knowledge, it would be great to hear your ideas.
Ooh, I love that. I'll make sure that gets, if you didn't hear it here, you'll hear it again soon in our Wild Side Weekly newsletter, which you can subscribe to. So I'll make sure that questions gets asked to our community there, and probably all the Harbor Wild Watch social media things as well. So, and you did mention, yes, we have 2 sites. I think Mike Behrens and I will be out deploying mussel cages, and of course we would love some friends. So if you are interested in getting out there and deploying a mussel cage or retrieving a mussel cage, we'd love to plug you into that. We also have my mother dearest watching from Montana. So, we have a broad reach here at this Cocktails and Fishtales and this digital format that we are rocking and rolling. That is a great question. I love it. Thanks, Danielle. Let's see. I think Yeah, I'm gonna refresh one more time.
Well, hopefully it's because I covered everything.
Yeah, it's very good. Or I don't know, sometimes it's been a while since I've been in an organic chemistry class, and I feel like sometimes those are like, wait, what is that? Yeah, I guess maybe on the PCB and pH, at this point, those are chemicals that are no longer allowed in products, and so they're just kind of, yeah, that legacy where I guess with the construction and things, like where, if we were to ask the community what they think, where would we be looking to see where we might find the source of those PCBs or PA?
Yeah, so of course, you would see more contamination during those in those older industrialized areas. Those buildings were made way before any of the bans had gone on, but so I would look to that. Creosote pilings have been an issue in the past. Remediation, sometimes when they take the creosote pilings, it can cause an uptick in contamination. So those may contribute.
Yeah. And we are getting some questions coming in. So thank you for answering that. Jen is wondering, how can we sign up to volunteer?
Yes, you can email me. Our WDFW volunteer website, they require us to have you sign up as a WDFW volunteer. And this kind of covers you in case something happens while you're out doing work for us, as far as like insurance and things like that. But then after that, if you contact me via email, I can go right in and I can add you as a volunteer for this actual project. And I'm not sure how Harbor Wild Watch would like to orchestrate that. If you guys want to talk amongst yourselves and get back to me, we certainly have some groups that organize their own volunteers, and then I get a list, but I can also facilitate that as well.
Perfect.
And and ask your preference as to where you would like to deploy. We always like to get it near someone's house.
Yes, absolutely. And definitely, if they go through you, awesome. Or you're always welcome to email me, Stina@harborwildwatch.org, and I will connect you to Danielle's email. So we'll get some teamwork going there. So would be delighted to have more people out, because we've got some pretty hardcore volunteers who really enjoy coming out in the middle of the night with us to do wild beach things. I know we'll be looking forward to our winter beach monitoring, which takes place in the December and January months. I know my mother, dearest, enjoys, she comes out for Christmas and we get her out on the beach with her and my dad. So, and she's tuning in and she's wondering, Danielle, do you eat mussels from the Puget Sound, knowing what you know about everything you know?
I get this. Yes, I do. I love myself some good cioppino. But yes, I follow the Washington State Health Guidelines as to how much shellfish and fish to eat, and I am perfectly fine with eating our mussels from our Pen Cove shellfish.
Awesome, perfect. Yeah. My coworker Rachel would say we don't eat our friends, and I would say we do this work to protect our friends so that they are available for us to eat. So you can weigh it out there, but yeah, that is good to hear. And with that, I think we'll end on that tasty note there. I have a couple Harbor Wild Watch announcements, but I want to turn it back over to you just in case there's any closing words you'd like to leave us on.
Thank you for inviting us. I always like to talk about the project, and you guys are officially my second presentation that I've given. So thank you for your your patience with me. And I know that Mariko Langna, she's the project manager. She was wishing that she could be here tonight, but she has a little baby at home who didn't feel that her schedule was set to be presenting tonight. So I was happy to step in her place. So thank you very much for having us.
Absolutely. And we'll echo that our own executive director recently had a baby. And so those fill-in adaptability humans, we appreciate you so much. So thanks for coming in hot and teaching us about how mussels are being used in community science. It's really, really fun to hear that. So you can look forward to that in, what was it, October? Yeah.
October 18th and the beginning of November for deployment. I'll be sending out some emails. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's, we got some long range programs to look forward to. If you're looking for something this week, we are going to be doing an in-person beach walk on Friday. We'll meet at Sunrise Beach Park at 9:30 in the parking lot. Please bring a mask just in case we do need to, get closer than 6 feet. There's some cool stuff to see, but we have some fun techniques to keep us, socially distant, but learning and having fun out during this low tide that's going to happen this week. So feel free to join us for that. We also have a rockfish survey training. So for those scuba divers out there, if you'd like to learn how to add a twist of science to your next dive, I'm happy to go through that training. We'll be meeting at the Tacoma Scuba parking lot at 6 p.m. on Saturday. So join for that. We could get our community science on this week. We're doing good. And then trying to think what else. That's kind of what's coming up for now. I know we have a premiere video next week of some low tide beach walks from Southeast Alaska. These remote places you're not likely to get a peek at, but we've got some footage and educational content to delight and inspire you. I assume it will be nice and sunny next week. And so you'll get a nice video of us in the rain, and it's delightful. So tune in for that. And of course, look forward to September. We have our 7th annual Make Waves benefit. Mark your calendar for the date that is not on the top of my head, but I believe it's the 23rd. It's a Thursday, but that's in our Wildside Weekly newsletter, which you can subscribe to and stay up to date with all things happening with Harbor Wild Watch. So thank you so much for tuning in to today's Cocktails and Fish Tales. We'll be back at it again next month with some exciting looks at environmental filmmaking with our very own Carly Bester. So tune in for that. It'll be great. And there'll be more details on our website soon. So again, big cheers to Danielle and for all of you who tuned in, asked questions, participated. We're getting lots of love in the comments. We're getting wonderful. Thank you. So appreciate that, everyone. And other than that, I will end us on a learn, have fun. So thanks for watching, and I'm gonna go find the button to click. So that's always exciting. All right, bye everybody.